Around 85% of every humanoid robot shipped anywhere in the world last year came from a single country. That figure, from a Barclays market report, is the kind of number that stops you. Not robot arms on factory floors. Not warehouse carts following a painted line. Machines with 2 legs, 2 arms, cameras for eyes, and electric joints where hips and knees should be, built in China, at a scale no other nation has matched. The viral clips show one walking on stage to applause. What they never show is what sits just off camera. Rows of unfinished torsos on assembly benches, trays of joint modules waiting for calibration, battery packs stacked beside test rigs. Making one impressive prototype is hard. Making thousands is a different industry entirely, and it starts with a single component that determines whether any of this is even possible. The real story is the factory behind the robot. The actuator benches, the wiring harnesses, the calibration rigs, the motion capture rooms, and the final test floors where a human-shaped machine gets a serial number. To understand why this matters, you have to go inside the build. A humanoid robot has to carry its own batteries, protect its electronics, move with enough force to lift objects, and remain light enough that its motors don't burn out moving its own body. Every kilogram added to the torso becomes extra load on the hips. Every battery cell that extends operating time adds mass to the legs. That is the core constraint. The machine is both the worker and the payload. This is why humanoid factories look nothing like appliance factories. They are closer to precision machining shops crossed with EV battery assembly lines and aerospace test rooms. The parts are bench-sized, but tolerances matter. A small mechanical error becomes a wobble when the robot takes a step. One loose connector becomes a fall. One mismatched knee changes the gait. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology counted more than 140 humanoid robot manufacturers and more than 330 models in 2025. That number tells you something important. The race is no longer about who can build a demo. It is about who can turn the humanoid body into a repeatable manufacturing system. And that system begins not with the face, but with the joint. Inside any humanoid factory, the most critical station is the actuator torque bench. An actuator is the electric muscle of the robot. Motor, gears, bearings, encoder, and control electronics packed into one compact joint module. Put one at the shoulder and the arm can lift. Put one at the knee and the leg can extend. A humanoid can need dozens of them, each delivering torque, resisting shock, reporting position, managing heat, and surviving tens of thousands of repeated motions. At the torque bench, each actuator is spun, loaded, and heated under controlled conditions. Engineers are not just checking whether it moves. They are checking whether it moves identically to every other unit in the batch. If the left knee is slightly stronger than the right, the walking algorithm has to compensate. If one ankle module reports position with small errors, the balance system gets noisy data. One overheated actuator shortens the robot's working shift. Repeatability is what separates a laboratory robot from a product. A technician at the bench loads the next module, watches the torque curve on the screen, and marks it pass or fail. If it fails, it does not move to assembly, it goes back. That discipline, applied across dozens of actuators per machine and dozens of machines per day, is what makes a humanoid factory different from a robotics lab. Once the actuator line is stable, the rest of the machine can be assembled around it. A humanoid torso is not a metal frame. It is packaging. The core must carry processors, power electronics, inertial sensors, and cooling surfaces. The hips must transfer large forces from the legs into the body. The arms must be light enough for quick movement but strong enough for useful loads. Assembly follows a strict sequence because access closes as the body fills in. Wire harnesses are routed before the torso closes. A forgotten cable forces a partial rebuild. Actuators are mounted in the order that leaves fasteners and connectors reachable. Battery packs go in with attention to weight distribution, because a top-heavy humanoid is harder to balance and harder to recover when it stumbles. Protective shells attach last. shielding sensors, cables, and moving assemblies from dust and impact. China's advantage at this stage is proximity. The Shenzhen, Dongyuan corridor and the broader Yangtze River Delta cluster concentrate EV battery suppliers, motor and gearbox manufacturers, electronics assembly lines, aluminum casting shops, and plastic injection molders within a short drive of the robot factory. A design change can go from an engineering whiteboard to a revised part in a supplier meeting before the week ends. That rapid iteration loop, prototype, test, reject, revise, retest, compresses what used to take months into days. But a well-assembled skeleton is still useless if it cannot sense the floor beneath its feet. After assembly, the robot moves to the calibration rail, a frame with safety tethers where the machine learns the actual behavior of its own body. Inertial measurement units are zeroed so the robot can detect tilt and acceleration. Joint encoders are calibrated against known positions, so the control software knows where each limb actually is, not where it assumes the limb should be. Force sensors in the feet are checked against known loads. Cameras and depth sensors are aligned, so the robot's perception matches the physical world. Then engineers begin motion testing. The sequence can look almost boring from outside. Lift one arm, bend one knee, rotate the torso, shift weight from foot to foot. But each motion feeds data back into the control stack. The robot is measuring delay in each joint, friction under load, and how the body reacts when multiple actuators move together. Walking comes last. It is a controlled fall repeated with precision. Shift the center of mass, commit weight to one leg, swing the other forward, catch, repeat. Humans do this without thinking. A robot does it through sensors and control loops running hundreds of times per second, every iteration checking EMU tilt, foot contact force, and joint angle simultaneously. Engineers watching the calibration rig are looking for wobble, hesitation, foot slip, and recovery response. A robot that hesitates half a second before catching itself is not ready for a real floor. One that recovers cleanly from a small push, resets its balance estimate, and keeps walking, that one moves to the next station. Calibration is where a correctly assembled machine becomes a functional one, and it marks the end of the build phase and the start of the endurance phase. Legs move the robot through human spaces. Hands let it work with human tools. A factory, warehouse, or service corridor is full of objects designed for fingers: handles, boxes, trays, plugs, drawers, switches. The more human-like the hand, the more existing infrastructure it can use without modification. But the hand has almost no room for actuators, sensors, cables, and structure, and it has to survive impacts, twisting loads, and thousands of grips. Testing at the gripper force gauge is blunt. Can the robot pick up a box without crushing it? Can it hold a tool without dropping it? Can it press a button with enough force but not too much? Can it place an object in the same location 100 times in a row? A failed grip test early in production is information. A failed grip test after shipping is a problem. The answers depend on hardware and software together. Vision tells the robot where the object is. Motion planning tells the arm how to reach it. Force control tells the hand when contact is made. Grip control sets the pressure. If any layer fails, the robot can look intelligent 1 second and helpless the next. Lighting changes. Surfaces are slippery. Boxes shift. This is why serious humanoid factories include simulated work cells, where the robot handles real objects under changing conditions, not for a camera, but as quality control. The most valuable area in a humanoid factory may not be the assembly line. It may be the endurance floor, where machines repeat the same movements for thousands of cycles, while engineers measure what breaks, what drifts, and what improves. One station tests walking over flat ground. Another introduces ramps, small obstacles, and textured surfaces. A third focuses on manipulation, picking parts from bins, moving items between tables, carrying loads. Cameras record motion. Logs capture every sensor reading, including joint temperature on a diagnostic screen. If several robots hesitate at the same movement, the issue is likely software. If one robot behaves differently from the rest, the issue is assembly variation. If a motor warms faster than expected, the fix might be cooling, load management, or control tuning. Scale turns this into an advantage. Omdia figures reported by the Associated Press put AGIBOT and Unitree each above 5,000 general-purpose humanoid units shipped in 2025. A company producing at that volume collects far more failure data per week than a company finishing a handful of prototypes per month. A fix cannot be a one-off patch. It has to be manufacturable, and a software update has to run correctly across hardware variations in the fleet. The training floor is where engineering culture shifts from make it work to make it work the same way every time. China's position in humanoid robots is not a single breakthrough. It is an industrial stack built over 2 decades. The battery cells that power humanoid joints come from factories that already supply EV makers. The motors and gearboxes draw on a supplier ecosystem shaped by industrial automation and consumer electronics. Aluminum castings, circuit boards, camera modules, fasteners, and plastic housings all flow from clusters where rapid prototyping is standard practice. When a humanoid company needs a revised bracket, a tighter gear ratio, or a lighter housing, it reaches a supplier in the same cluster, tests the part, and pushes it into a pilot batch, without waiting for components to cross oceans. That compression of the iteration loop matters most early in a technology's life, when the design is still changing fast. The breadth of the field in 2025, more than 330 models by the ministry's count, reflects that iteration speed. Most of those models will not survive as products. That is normal. The filter is economic, not technical. Matrix Robotics Matrix 3, about 1.7 meters tall, was priced at roughly $99,000 per unit according to the Associated Press. A customer buying industrial equipment asks how many hours it can work, what it costs to repair, how often it fails, and whether the numbers make sense. Those questions eliminate far more contestants than the engineering challenge of making the robot walk. A humanoid robot is expensive because it buys flexibility. A conveyor is cheap per task because it does one thing. A robotic arm is powerful because the work cell is designed around it. A humanoid takes the opposite bet. It accepts mechanical complexity so it can work in spaces already built for people. Stairs, doors, shelves, tools, buttons, carts. The manufacturing cost of that bet shows up in reliability testing. Engineers need to know how long actuators last. They need to know which cables wear first. They need to know whether covers crack after repeated impacts, whether dust and vibration break assumptions made in the lab, and how the robot behaves after being shut down, crated, shipped, and rebooted at a customer site. A robot rebooting after shipping has to reestablish its own calibration, confirm its joint health, and pass a local balance check before it is allowed to work. Morgan Stanley expected China's humanoid robot sales to more than double in 2026 to around 28,000 units, according to the Associated Press. That figure matters less as a precise prediction than as a production signal. Factories are preparing for a much larger run. When volumes rise, every weak part becomes more expensive to replace, and every assembly mistake repeats across the fleet. A technician swapping an ankle module in the field in under 10 minutes is an engineering achievement worth more than a perfect lab demo. A robot face creates a dangerous illusion. A head turn or eye contact makes the machine seem more capable than it is, which is exactly why the face is treated as a precision engineering problem inside the factory, not a design flourish. The head carries cameras for perception, microphones for voice input, speakers for responses, and neck actuators that point sensors toward a person or object. Every component has to be thermally managed because electronics generate heat in a compact enclosed space. Camera lenses must stay unobstructed by soft facial coverings. Mechanism gaps must not appear when the face moves, and all of it must survive the production line's handling and the customer's operating environment. A face that photographs well in a press release is not automatically manufacturable at volume. Some industrial customers actively prefer a clearly machine-like head because it sets honest expectations and simplifies safety planning around the robot. A service robot at a reception desk might benefit from expressive eyes and natural head movement. A warehouse unit working in a dark aisle needs accurate cameras and a protective housing, not articulated eyelids. The face is the part that earns the click. The camera alignment, thermal packaging, and long-term structural integrity of the head are what determine whether the robot still works after 6 months in a real environment. From the engineer's bench, a face is just another subsystem, one that has to pass the same production tests as every joint in the leg. At the end of the line, each robot runs through a sequence that looks simple from outside and catches failures from every earlier stage. Power on, battery check, network connection, joint health, sensor alignment, camera feed, audio system, balance test, walking test, arm motion, gripper motion, emergency stop, software version verified against hardware revision, serial number scanned, packaging begins. The packaging itself is engineered. A humanoid is tall, expensive, and full of calibrated components. Custom crates absorb drop and shock in transit. Battery handling procedures comply with shipping regulations. Reactivation instructions tell the customer's team how to bring the machine back online after shipping. Rerun calibration, confirm joint temperatures on the diagnostic screen, verify balance before releasing the robot to work. All of that is necessary because the factory can control the build and the test floor. It cannot control the floor the robot enters. Dust, uneven surfaces, changing lighting, Wi-Fi gaps, objects left in the wrong position, people walking too close, doors that stick. A useful humanoid has to handle enough of that to justify its price. The result is not just a machine. It is a manufacturing system. Joints, frames, sensors, software, spare parts, field service teams, and data flowing back from every deployed unit into the next production batch. That is how the humanoid robot stops being a science fiction image and starts becoming equipment. And that may end up being the most important engineering achievement in the entire story, one that has nothing to do with how human the robot looks. Humanoid robots are becoming a manufacturing problem, not just a robotics problem. The breakthrough is not a viral walk or a perfect face. It is the ability to produce actuators to spec, assemble frames consistently, calibrate sensors quickly, test motion safely, ship units without damage, and use field data to improve the next batch. That is how every major machine industry matures. Cars became practical when factories could build them in repeatable numbers. Aircraft became reliable when parts, testing, maintenance, and safety systems grew up together. Humanoid robots are entering that same stage now, no longer science fiction, not yet ordinary equipment, but moving into the territory where manufacturing scale decides what the technology can actually become. From the actuator bench to the serial number floor, every station in that factory exists to answer one question. Can this machine do the job reliably enough to be worth the cost? The real question is not whether a humanoid robot can perform for a camera. It is which job will make the human shape worth the price first. If you want more breakdowns of the factories, machines, and megaprojects behind the technologies changing how the world is built, subscribe, and you won't miss the next one.